Hello, RedHawks Nation. This is Rayya Plett, recording an online interview for R360. Today I'll be talking to Fiona Unrau of St. Pierre, Manitoba, about ALS. Hi, Fiona.
Hi, Rayya. How are you today?
I'm good. So, Fiona, you grew up in Low Farm and attended the Morris School back when there was a fierce rivalry between the Rosenort RedHawks and the Morris Mavericks sports teams. Do you have any memories of that time?
I have tons of memories of that time, Rayya, and it's really funny because through all the different sports rivalries, I was always good friends with your mom, Heather, and I would say, oh, so-and-so did this or so-and-so did that, and I would complain to Heather, and she'd be like, yeah, well, whatever, it's okay. So it was super competitive, and all small towns have their rivalries, and Morris was definitely with Rosenort, and always a good battle.
Okay. So today we're going to be talking about ALS and how this disease affected your dad. Can you tell us what ALS stands for?
I can try to. It's not easy to pronounce, but ALS stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and it means that there's something missing with the lateral up and down movement in your spine.
Okay. Can you tell us about your dad and how he found out that he had ALS?
So my dad, born and raised a farmer. He's born in 1947 and grew up in Rosenfeld and Low Farm. And it was really difficult to actually find out how he had ALS. There isn't an actual specific test. There isn't a blood work that will, or an MRI scan that will tell you something like you have cancer or you have this. What they do is my dad would have gone to his doctor with multiple different symptoms. So, for example, he was starting to drop things from his hands. He was a very strong person. Being a farmer, he started to just drop things out of the blue. He would be walking and he would start to trip. And he would notice his muscles starting to cramp up and get really tired. And it's really difficult to determine that because obviously, as you grow older, this is a symptom of just growing older as well. So it's not so much that he had a test for ALS, but what they did is they tested for everything else, from cancer to multiple sclerosis, to all sorts of different things. And what they did is they rule out all of those things. And they say, okay, well, you don't have any of these things, so you must have ALS. And that's, on April 15th, 2011 is when my dad got his diagnosis of ALS.
And how did this impact his life, though?
So for my dad, if you can, Rosenort being a small town, and I'm sure, and most people watching this can definitely relate to it, is you walk into the coffee shop, everybody turns and is like, hey, Ron, or hey, Ryan, right? Everybody knows everybody. So when someone like my dad or any other person in a community goes to open the door of the coffee shop and he can't open it, right? Then he's thinking, well, what's going on, right? Or he's walking and he just trips. So it really started to impact a lot of different areas of his life. And it progresses really differently in different people. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I'm just going to keep going. Oftentimes it will affect your upper body first. And a lot of times people can be put on breathing machines or feeding tubes. My dad, it started actually at his feet. And then started working his way up there. So, for example, in 2011, he moved off of his family farm in Low Farm and bought a house in Morris. He was still farming at that time. However, by the time harvest came, he couldn't actually climb up into the tractor. He couldn't climb up into the combine. So my dad worked with some great people, and I think it was actually a good friend of mine, Dean Harder, that created this piece of equipment that you would put on the tractor, and it was actually an elevator, and it would lift my dad up into the tractor. So he still had the strength in his arms and his hands, but he couldn't climb up. So there's a lot of things that he could still do, but we had to find new ways for him to be able to do them.
Okay. So my next question is, what are some things would you want people to know about people who are living with ALS?
I think that what I would want most people to know is that outside of what their appearance may look like, it doesn't always match what's going on in their head. So, for example, the ALS flower is the blue corn flower, and it's the blue corn flower because it is a very hardy, flower. It's persistent. It keeps moving, even though it looks really fragile on the outside. So understand that for people, many people dealing with ALS, my dad was, definitely fell into this category. His body looked really, really frail and fragile, but his mind was 100%. And that's the thing about this disease is, we all know to some degree that we're dying. But when you get told that you have a disease that there's no cure for and that there's no treatment, it really is like, wow, this is the beginning, right? And there's different ways and it's okay to be really mad and really upset. I know that I had many moments where, I grew up Christian family, I still am Christian. And there were times where I said, like, why, God? Like, this is not fair. Why would you do this to my dad? As I saw this disease progress, I had thoughts, well, sure, it's not fair to my dad, but who would it be fair to? It's not fair to anybody. So it's really hard to come to all of those understandings. And there's different diseases throughout the world and everyone does that. But just really understanding that the mind is 100% there. They know who you are. They know what they're going through. They know that they're dying. And it's really difficult on how to help with that. And the biggest thing is we have to just ask. And because there's I wanted to do more for my dad, but I couldn't. So we just have to ask, what can I do to help you? And we have to rely on them to tell us as much as they can to help us.
What benefits of the donations, did they help? And do they seem to help?
They definitely, all of the donations helped a ton. We do have all provinces in Manitoba do have in Canada, excuse me, they do have an ALS society. I'm not 100% sure on the exact amount of Manitoba donations that stay in Manitoba. However, I do know that for my dad, he had a really great caregiver in my stepmom. She happened to be a nurse, so she was able to care for my dad. But he needed a lot of equipment. He needed an electric wheelchair. Well, first he needed a walker, and then he needed an electric wheelchair because he was wheelchair bound full time. And you take for granted, getting on and off of the toilet or getting in and out of bed or even, rolling over in bed. There's a ton of equipment that's needed. So donations that are given to the ALS Society, again, I'm not sure what amount stays in Manitoba, but it helps them, one, do research, but it also helps them have this equipment available for people to use it. With ALS, the life expectancy is 3 to 5 years, so it's not long. We were very lucky that my dad, he actually got, 5 years, 1 month, and about 6 days, and he had a really good quality of life all the way to the end. But for families who have to buy a wheelchair or buy lifts for their house for such a short period of time, it can really impact their finances. And the ALS Society of Manitoba has this equipment available. to let families use, because it would be life changing. So for a family to go out and buy all of this equipment, which could be tens of thousands of dollars to use for, it might be 6 months, it might be 6 years, we don't know. It can really, alter their life, not just, of their immediate family, but extended family as well. So the ALS Society has really amazing equipment and resources for education and support when it comes to a family member who's been diagnosed with ALS.
If we wanted to learn even more, where should we go to learn more?
There's lots of different resources out there. The ALS Society of Manitoba is a great one, obviously. They're on Dublin Avenue in Winnipeg. Their phone number is 204-831-1510. And their website is als.mb.ca. There's so much online, Lou Gehrig, the famous Yankees baseball player who made it famous. He passed away on June 2nd, 1941. Yeah, hence why that's ALS Awareness Day. And I can tell you that I don't know if it's the same for other situations, because this is the only one I've been in, and I hope it's the last one I'm in. But you don't really start learning about certain diseases generally until they affect you, right? Before my dad was diagnosed, I didn't know anything about ALS. I didn't know that it was fatal, that there's no cure. And you learn a lot more once you're thrown into it. And I would encourage everyone, whether it's ALS or whatever you're dealing with, once you find out about it, to throw yourself into, if you get it from the right resources, research. You don't want to believe everything you read on the internet. But when you get in touch with the, ALS Society, for example, it's really good to learn as much as you can, so that you can know what to expect and kind of what's expected of you as a family member.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Thank you for telling me about your dad and his experience with ALS and about his life.
No problem, Rayya. I hope that nobody, I know there's other people dealing with this, and it's unfortunate and tragic, and hopefully one day we'll get somewhere. But yeah, the more people that know about it, the more awareness, the better.
Mm-hmm. And this is Rayya Plett signing off.